Hey guys, JD Candy Shop Customs here. Thought I'd take a minute and maybe go through a bit of soldering stuff. We've done about a bunch of soldering stuff this week. There's really bad ways of doing it and some less bad ways. So maybe I can help you figure things out a little bit. First off, figure out which wire you're using. This is some 18 gauge off a spool. You're going to need some strippers, not the dancing kind. It's different types of wire strippers. So there's this type here. It's got a couple jaws on the end. Adjustable, so you adjust the stop so that you can cut through the insulation and pull. The thing that you want to do is pull the insulation off and not cut any of the wire strands. There is probably this style here, which is the most common. On this end of the pliers, the strippers, there is the different sizes. So like we said, this is some 18 gauge, so figure out which size you're cutting, and you just basically cut into the wire, pull that insulation off, and there you go. Again, same thing. You're trying not to pull the or cut the strands of wires. I like this style here. It's spring-loaded, so you just basically go in with your 18, figure out how long of the insulation you want to cut, give it a pull, and you can cut that. My favorite style stripper, other than the dancing style, is this one here. So there is a claw and a cutter on this side, and I can adjust tension with this knob here. So basically I can figure out how long a wire I want to strip, put it on that side there, and I just squeeze the handle and it pulls it apart for me. It's a lazy man's way of doing it. If you're doing a bunch of harness building, this seems to work the best for me because it's nice and easy and it's consistent. So there we go. This is ready for some soldering. If you are soldering, what I would say is plug in your iron right away. Let it get fully hot. The hotter the better. That way you have the least amount of time going in and out of this thing. The other thing I would suggest is get a third hand. Basically it's a holder, right? So you have two free hands to operate your solder and your wire. Some alligator clips here. One of my guys called them crocodile clips. So hold it somewhat away from where the alligator clip is. It's going to act as a heat sink. It's going to pull the heat away, which is kind of opposite of what you're trying to do. With your soldering iron up to temperature, you're going to want to maybe clean the tip. There's different cleaners, but in the shop, kind of use whatever's around. And the solder you want to use is a rosin core solder. So the solder, the rosin core is for electronics. The non-rosin core stuff is stuff that plumbers use. We're not kind of soldering pipes. So depending on what you're doing, you're going to have a little bit of a wider tip. The wider tip is good for wires. The pointy, skinny tip is good for electronics, so like circuit boards and stuff like that. First example I'm going to give you is what we call tinning the wire. Sometimes we've got to solder the end of the wire so that it is hard and solid. It's not a bunch of loose strands. So this will be tinning the wire. Use what you know about heat. Heat's going to go up. Heat travels up, so you're going to want to kind of have the iron on the bottom of that wire. The other thing is put a wet puddle on the end of that tip, because wet transfers heat a lot better than dry. So you're going to have a fresh puddle of solder on the end of this thing. You're going to go from the bottom side up, and you're going to put the solder on the top. And what you can do is just kind of move that solder into the wire. So there you go. There's a nice fresh tinned end. Took 2 seconds. That's why it's real important to have that solder up to temperature. Probably the next most common thing you'll do is connecting two wires together. So again, you're going to take your strippers and you're going to strip an amount of wire. Now some people like to twist, some people don't like to twist. I like to twist, just like Chevy Checker. I'm going to take another wire here and I'm going to strip a similar amount, and the length of how much you strip is going to kind of vary depending on the wire gauge. So like I said, this is 18 gauge. It's fairly small, fairly easy to manipulate. So I like to kind of do a crisscross applesauce here. Kind of do a little bit of a cross, and I like to kind of wind the two strands into each other, nice and tight. The tighter the better. Yeah, I know, that's what she said. Some people like the strands kind of straight and loose, and they like to jam them in like that. I'm not too big a fan of that because it makes a big, chunky, nasty looking connection, splice. So now what we've done, we've got two 18 gauge wires. They're kind of intertwined to each other. This is going to essentially be a bigger, thicker point, thicker wire. So the more mass we have in that connection, the more heat it takes. Essentially, it's like it's a bigger wire, thicker wire, like I said. So we gotta be smart. We want to get in, get out. We don't typically want to heat the wire for a long period of time. A, the hotter the wire gets, the insulation starts to melt, and that's no good. And B, the hotter the wire gets, it'll get brittle if we get the thing too hot. So we just want to kind of fuse the connection together. So again, we're going to have a fresh hot puddle. Our iron is well up to temperature, so I'm going to go to the iron to the wire, left to right, and I'm just going to kind of go through, in and out. So even being a thicker wire, it took only a few seconds, and we don't have excess solder. We don't have a bunch of booger on there. It's nice and tight and nice and clean. You will want to use some heat shrink. So heat shrink is going to be some rubber tube that will shrink down size based on heat applying to it. So I like to take my heat shrink and I'll cut it to the lengths that I want beforehand. And usually what we'll do is we'll put that heat shrink on there. If this is a circuit repair on a harness, don't forget to put your heat shrink on there first. But you'll put it over that, and the proper thing to do is use a heat gun. So this is just a heat and paint stripper, 1300 watts. And what you'll do is you'll use the heat gun to cause it to shrink. Now this is the ideal way because we don't have open flame and we don't get the plastic of the heat shrink to catch on fire, and it's just going to shrink down to size. Not everyone has one of these, so guess what most people end up using? Most people end up using this guy here, and even though it's the wrong tool, it will work and will do the job. So the trick with these ones, when you're using a flame, is keep it moving, and you can see it kind of shrinking. I can go to the top. I can also start to kind of twist this wire. So I can turn it, kind of go from the bottom side, kind of from the top side, keep it moving, give it some time to absorb some of that heat. Again, this is the wrong way of doing it, but it's better than nothing, right? So you can see how that's shrunk down. There is different types of heat shrink that some of them, they have a sealant in there and it'll ooze out that sealant and make sure that there's no water in there. Much better than electrical tape. So that's a splice, nice and neat and tidy, and it's nice and intact. What else can we show you guys? Sometimes we have to tie into a circuit in the middle of the circuit. A lot of times we can just take those strippers and we can spread the wire right in the middle of it. We don't even have to take a razor blade to it. Some people take a box cutter or a razor blade and they'll go into that and remove the insulation. Again, the downside or danger is do not cut the wires because you're reducing the circuit size, and that's going to be a hot spot, a weak spot on the circuit. So if we have a circuit like that and we're trying to splice into, add a circuit into it, what we can do is just pull back that amount that you want to expose. Take your tie-in wire, so I'm just going to do a loop here. There you go. And then I can kind of go to that point and I'll get to that splice location, and then I'll do my nice twist around that bare exposed portion of the wire. Now there we go, set up in my third hand. My iron's still nearby, it's already up to temperature still. Again, keep that iron hot, fresh puddle, go from the bottom side, go from the iron to the wire, and there you go. In and out, tickety-boo. Again, don't forget your heat shrink. In this case, I can just try to slide my heat shrink over from this side and get it to that point. Now maybe what we can do is show you the proper method. We'll get this thing here, fire up our heat gun. And there you go. Nice splice, nice butt connection, and a nice tinned end. Alright, thanks for watching. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hopefully that gives you a couple tips. I think I'll do a similar thing on some butt connectors. Haha, yeah, I said butt connector. Yeah, check out, we got some new gear. Catch you later.